Yeah, and they opened up the act. We're trying to tell them we don't really need to do this because there's a policy in place for this now. And he just really, as a Democrat in that tough situation, in my opinion, really wanted to get a bill passed. And had his cooperation not been there, I mean, again, we ended up being able to be functional at the end of it all. We moved forward and stuff like that. But there was some really stupid stuff in there, and the whole attempt was to was to render us dysfunctional.
There's a huge amount of criticism about the doctors at that time. Can we agree? Whether it was warranted or not, something was going to happen. So I'm not defending Kavanaugh, but if I was,
it was done the wrong way.
Something could have happened under the existing rules. The same department that issues medical marijuana cards, even at that time when it was the Department of Community Health, was still the department that was in charge of licensing the physicians. So they could have handled it completely internally.
I got to tell you something, but I got to tell you something.
He's a legislator, though. He changes the law. He explained that to me directly. I'm a legislator. I changed the law.
There's a Democrat and a Republican majority who got a bill through and passed.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I don't think I've had a case where someone has lost on the bona fide doctor-patient relationship since then. Number one. Number two, as before the Court of Appeals on a case where the prosecutor is trying to argue that, and one of the justices on the panel said, I don't think you're going to get anyone on the panel that's going to agree. And if you want to keep arguing about bona fide relationship, that's fine, but, waste your time if you want. You got so much time. I'm just saying, it's interesting.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, I'm glad that it turned out that way, but this is the kind of thing we were discussing.
I thought it was disgusting, too. And I would say that there was all these things, these agencies and whatnot. But then let's just play devil's advocate for a second. It's not traditional medicine in the sense that they can't prescribe it. We agree about that, right?
The memo was not that great. From
the memo was inaccurate. They were created a memo.
Yeah.
And added pre-existing conditions. That's not the way. If they're going to treat it, they'd say, listen, all doctors are beholden to the standards that go along with the issuance of their license. Thou shalt do no harm. Thou shalt not break the law. Thou shalt conform with the rules of the state of Michigan, which employ a number of different state and federal laws in order to maintain your license. And if you have a DA license, to keep that, your reporting of whatever you're doing is going to be at both. So, so what are you going to say? Okay, doctors that want to perform, participate in certifications and recommendations, follow those rules. Those that would require you. I mean, for example, do they make different rules for lawyers that are advising, patients or caregivers? No, there's rules and ethics and ways that, we're going to be required to. They didn't create new, but they picked on, I agree, they picked on the doctors. But I'm just saying, I guess the best argument to be made, just forget people that were defending or thrashing. The attempt was they're going to destroy the act by some terrible, amendments. This is one that if we can get out in front of, neutralize the language, make it not that bad, absorb some of the. I know CPU was up there, whatever they grabbed onto, trying to make it less. And for example, the follow-up care. What came out of? Does anyone think about this? I do. It's shit that I got to think about.
Right.
Follow-up care. Do they have to do follow-up care?
There has to be
what?
What is the language?
Expectations.
By whom?
Yeah. By the doctor.
There you go. That means that the patient's activities
the patient is responsible for the doctors.
Nothing. The patient's responsible for nothing. The law says is the doctor expects it. Any doctor that knows the law that's got on their way out, I expect you to return. That's all you need, really. I mean,
the patient should be able to rely upon their state licensed physician as well.
Yep.
Yeah, if they told them on the way out, that should be enough. Okay? So, whether it happens or not is for another day. I don't like that argument. I don't like saying that's what it says, but that's what it says. I'd rather say, well, they did go back or they called, they followed up or did something. But that's what it came out of. I don't know if that's that bad. Retrospect, at the time, I thought it was terrible. I mean,
it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
It wasn't as bad as it could have been, and it was really look. There's no other state that, they went to Washington D.C. or Washington, District of Columbia, went medical after us. They would not release the names of doctors that a patient could go to. They were not known. You had to get a certain approval from the state, and then you couldn't advertise. That's how they dealt with Michigan. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
People can't find a doctor to get certified because, do you see what happened in Michigan, they would say? So I don't know. I think it's become less of an issue for some reason. I'd like to believe that. I don't think they make such a big deal out of it. The idea that they're just these.
Well, there's been court rulings that have helped out Section 8 scenario.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They had to be litigated, but still, at the end of the day, the legislation kind of. Lara could have been better the whole way. They could have been better.
They could have been, and you know what? And they have been since Shelley Edgerton has been the director.
I would say
The only reason why the
MMFLA
MMFLA is functional is because the department's chosen to kind of be
But listen,
reasonable about
the
their approach.
thing that happened, which is after the amendments in 2012 that went into effect in April 2013. I want to get back to this. There was a time when Lara, in the patient applications, had created the form that required you to go through, the doctor to go through and check off each of the elements of a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. They subsequently amended them to say broad language like, other than the original, like, I am a doctor and it's my professional opinion that this patient may receive palliative or therapeutic relief. It says, and I have complied with all other aspects of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, its amendments, statutes, and whatever. Like, that's what's in the applications now. Doctor signs off and they're saying, yeah, whatever I'm supposed to do, I did. And because the document itself, the more it is elaborate, if you can get that into evidence, you carry the day, right? If the doctor's statement says, not only I'm a doctor and I recommended it and they meet the criteria and this, but I also, the document speaks for itself. So anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get, but there was a way that
This
became
is part
out
of the history, man. We all dealt with this stuff.
It's interesting because they really did try to go after the doctors. I think if you're going to shut down the program, the way to do it is to kill the.
Of course it is.
Kill the monster.
They
kill
tried
the
it.
gatekeepers.
And they couldn't because it's too lucrative. It's too lucrative.
They tried.
They tried.
I would say they tried. Let's talk about why it didn't happen. Number one is because this nothing significant happened. I don't think that development was so irrational or unreasonable that it effectuated the ability of patients to go see doctors. It didn't require more cost for anyone. You know what I mean? It did. I think it did. I take that back because there are doctors. There are doctors and persons that would travel around. That may be at not permanent locations.
The hotel docs. Yeah.
Well, the permanent. I don't want to get it. It's probably the wrong time to talk about that. But the permanent location scenario that was defined in the law. And I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying it did effectuate
in the courts. It was
financial.
You didn't have the same protections from the traveling doc as you did from the doc that had the stationary office.
Right. No, I know. And my point was that,
which again,
of the amendments, it effectuated and did create costs for more people that they theoretically should have to.
The patients would have to travel farther to seek care.
It's not fair. It's not fair, right? But
that's what it came down to. And I agree, a hotel room is probably not the place you should be seeing a doctor. Let's just be honest. But at the same time, I could go to a hotel room if I was visiting a traveling doctor that was licensed and I was under their care, and they could write me a prescription for a drug.
It all should be legal. It's just the way the courts were handling it, and just was a dangerous scenario for a little while.
And they did make it a little exceptional. I think, especially in light of the fact that Michigan is promoting itself as on the leading and cutting edge of Skype medical procedures,
telemedicine, especially for the UP, and they've taken that out of play for medical marijuana patients.
People still do it.
Of course they do, because it's a necessity and because it makes sense. Mm-hmm. There's no good reason not to.
Let's talk about that. It's just an interesting topic to kind of fill some facts, use some facts on this. But think of some of the other oddities or things that just naturally are different about, if at all, interacting with physicians as a medical marijuana patient that just are different than other types of interactions with doctors, if any. Obviously, you're not getting the medicine from the doctor, which I think is one of the factors that contributes to this whole thing. If you're getting your medicine from the doctor, you go back and see your doctor. You have to do it to get your medicine. You're going to see him. They're going to notate the chart, bona fide all day long, right? But if you don't need to go back to him to get it, then it's lacking. You get it from somewhere else, right? The caregiver or some other place. I don't know. Jamie, you got any thoughts on that? Is it, I don't know. I know you live in a bubble a little bit in Ypsilanti. I'm just, don't see it as much. But Jim, Deborah, Steve, Jeff Fraser.
There's no reason that a medical marijuana patient could not see a doctor via some sort of telemedicine. It's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. I can get online right now,
Apps, there are apps.
and see a doctor
Yeah.
and get a prescription for drugs down at the pharmacy based on an interaction that I have with a doctor online that I've never met before.
There's an app. Dr. Phil, Anna Scott has an app out, and it's what's it called? MD, Medical MD or Dr. MD, something like this. And they'll write you a prescription. So why can't somebody be certified?
So while that was being worked out for medical marijuana, part of their history is across the hall. The legislature was working on
telemedicine.
further defining the telemedicine scenario.
Right.
But there are places that argue that they can utilize telemedicine for medical marijuana certifications, and they do it regularly.
I would say this. I would, for purposes of argument, not legal advice, I think that, I think unequivocally in legal advice, after the original certification, follow-ups via Skype or whatnot, not a problem. Over the phone, not a problem. Just some kind of contact. How you doing? How you feeling? You sleeping okay, etc. I think that the next argument, which I'm a little cautious with, but if it was, let's say you had 2 or 3 years of, in-person visits that you've been certified year after year after year with the same doctor that, I don't know, at some point start Skyping in, maybe. That's not legal advice. I'm saying that, but I can see that being
If you have a
supported.
chronic condition that is not going to change, that you've been treating with the same doctor for years, why can't you? It makes no sense.
That's what I'm saying. If you're treating for
Right.
years and they can just,
Makes
for the
no
purpose of
sense.
following up and, it's a nuance that I think is really missing the point. And even, even more so if these are the only doctors that these patients are having access to versus not going to a hotel and at the same time not going to a hotel and not having any contact with any doctors at all. I mean, even if they're there to see a marijuana doctor, but, in the worst case scenario that, it's predisposed to do that, a doctor might catch a lump in a breast. Doctor might catch, an ache in something that they say you should have that looked at. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you never know. Just seeing a doctor.
Yeah,
can't
but
be
if
bad.
you're in the UP, if you're out in the boondocks,
That's what I'm saying.
But
and
doesn't
you're
that go to
saying
the
to me
point-
that you would rather me not see a doctor
No,
because they can't
Well, why can't
physically
you
I'm
primary
saying
doctor
any
then do
doctor
that?
for those scenarios, Jim, I'm saying, how can you argue that seeing any doctor is bad
All right.
when they're not going to? I'm saying hotel schmotel. Turn up the, what is it? Sir?
Well, best case scenario, you'll go to your own primary doctor. That's what we're looking for. That you don't have to go to stay in a hotel, that you don't have to seek out a doctor, that you go to your primary care physician and say, write me my letter. I mean, come on.
Right, but my point is, and I think the best argument about the stupidity of, I argued with myself earlier. I was kind of suggesting that it's made things a little better for courts, but it really is stupid to exclude these traveling ones. Because it's really, again, back to, it's on the doctor. If the doctors can put their neck on the line, their legs on the line, and not care, not really do a thorough examination, that's on them. They'll get the complaint, they'll lose it. It shouldn't be because of the traveling. It's just because of the way they keep the records and the oversight, okay? And that's on the doctor. Because if you're going to let them do that and use their license, then they should be acting in a way that is traditional, keeping records like they would in any other type of thing. But my point, I guess, in support of the traveling doctor, is that these places that we're talking about that would be is because there's no other physicians there. They don't have money, may not have insurance, and better to see any doctor than no doctor because there might be something that can be picked up. That was what I was saying, and that is the real tragedy of that. You know what I mean? Any doctor. It's tough. I think there's a whole slew of diseases and whatnot that people don't even pick up on because they ignore it. They don't even want to deal with it. You know what I mean? Where seeing the doctor would be the best thing to do. There's all kinds of examples of people with gastro issues. Like, I've had a stomach ache for 10 years. I'm just going to ignore it because I think it's gas or something. You know what I mean? But I'm saying, like, that kind of stuff happens. And anyways. So, Jamie, back to what are some other things in that era that you think we could say were kind of like dark and weird and took some time to get some clarity about? That's a good question, right? 2012, 13, 14 till up to...
We hit SB 660, remember that?
That's a good one. Jeff Frazier's here to talk about that, too. SB 660, which is Jim Powers. Jim Powers, you have that by memory, right?
Yeah, that was what was commonly referred to as the, what was it, prairie plant system?
Yeah, they were going to grow in a former copper mine in the UP.